message online now.
Not yet, I just clicked the button. They'll be coming. There are people watching us, people who are in Florida for the winter and so forth, are keeping up with the class. And occasionally people just click in and click a random Talmud class. So whoever you are, if that is you, welcome.
But the people in Florida, they can't send you a message during the class.
They
You
can, if they're
respond.
on, they can type into a chat box here and I would see it. But so far, the only chats I've ever gotten are hi or great to see you. Or,
You could do a chat.
yeah, there's a chat box that runs along with the live stream. Okay, so who has us in an exact spot? Because I'm doing this with two chavrutas. So 26A1,
Yeah,
is that right?
yes.
22, you said 26.
All right.
26, A1.
Yeah, that's right.
So 26A1, are we at the Amar Rabbi Shimon? Is that where we are?
We're standing.
I'm gonna shoot
Yes, because we did the story of Rabbi Zera's father. Okay, so here's the little run-in to this that we had. The rabbis were in the process of expanding the categories of people who are presumed to be not kosher witnesses. And so you had the shepherd, and that was of small and large. And then we had a Rava argument about, is Rava the one who said the rabbis got rid of all shepherds? And we determined that he could, but it didn't apply to the people who are raising their stuff in their own private fields, pens, barns, and so forth. It's the people who are grazing their animals out there in the world. Those people are presumed thieves and are therefore considered to be not kosher witnesses in court. We also had the case of the Gazlan and the Khamsan. And, yep,
Were all lands private, or was there any like government-owned entities, and would that make a difference?
there was, the question is, were all lands private or were there government-owned entities? Recognizing that that ultimately becomes a part of the Palestinian-Israeli narrative of open lands, I want to say that what I'm about to say is an historical and an ancient issue that does not speak about anything from the Ottoman Empire. Back in Talmudic times, there was mostly open lands. Open fields out there that were not cultivated or settled were just hefker. Anybody could be out there with your sheep, anyone could be out there, and it wasn't like I have claimed everything from here to the next 3 mountains and you're on my land. That concept didn't really exist. You would have to have markers up and you would have to have borders and settlement. That doesn't mean that the governing authority didn't think that it had control over that land, but the governing authority didn't think that it owned the land. So if you had the Roman Empire and you were a farmer, the Romans would never come in and say, this is the government's land and you're on it, the way the feudal system in Europe was, where the local duke owned the land and you just farmed it. They also would not say, this is your land and we owe you respect. They would, the thing was, we get to demand from you what a certain percentage of what you produce on the land, whether or not you produce that from the land. So there was tax assessment, right? So the local area governors usually had some form of tax assessment over land, and it was the land that you were farming, not the open land.
So
It was-
we're grazing the sheep on the open land as opposed to land that somebody else owned?
Right.
Would one be negative and one would be okay, or?
Well, they
or
don't
they're both
say,
considered
the
to be
Gemara here
kosher
does not
witnesses?
say that if you're grazing on open or not open land. Because, I don't know why, because, it would be an argument from silence. They don't differentiate which kind of land you're on. Presumably, it's kind of hetzi, it's like, it's kind of open, kind of not. Where would your sheep do best to graze? On farm, and they're more nutritious by definition. It's wheat and barley and things like this, as opposed to scrub grass. So I think the assumption is if you're out there grazing, you're out there grazing in areas that are arable, and if they're arable, they're somebody's for their use, and you're eating their plants. I think that's the idea. No one's grazing their sheep in the wadi. the rocky
Yeah.
river bed. That's just not where you're gonna take your sheep, right? So, but they don't make the differentiation that you're making. We are on 26A1. Okay, so that was the row A. They did the Gazlan and the Khamsan, and they said the Gazlan, the thief, you don't need because it's already prohibited from the Torah not to steal, so what would that be? And then remember, it was stealing from the disabled. And not specifically the disabled, but when the disabled had found some unowned property, and halachically there's a question about whether or not they could, in Talmudic times, not our times, how they could not fully acquire an object. So if you stole from them, you're not really stealing from them. And we all had our own modern reactions to that, which I agree with, but nevertheless, they got to the right place where for Darchei Shalom, for the sake of peace, the rabbis had said, anybody who's taken stuff from somebody else is not a kosher witness. Then there was the question of the Khamsan, which is the person who walks up to in the market, and they don't want to stand in line, and they put money down on the table, and they take the thing, but the shop owner never made the deal with them. They're not really a thief, so it would have been okay, except for the fact that people really started doing this a lot. And then they were grabbing. So they were grab and go, and when you grab and go, you have a big problem. Because if I walk up and I say, okay, I got the paper, and I put $2.50 down, I guess is what the Times costs these days, which is astounding to me. That used to be the Sunday paper when I was a kid. But in any event, and then he grabs some papers and goes. Like, which papers did he take? Or if you're at the fruit cart, this is for the apples. Well, how many apples did he take? And are they supposed to be weighed? Or are they supposed to be counted? And that kind of thing. He might have left enough money, he might not. When people started grabbing and throwing their money down, the presumption was the shopkeepers were losing inventory, and that's a form of theft, and then they said that's not allowed. All right. Then we had a trio of that included the tax collectors and what was translated as the customs collectors. Remember this one? So that was the Gabaim and the Mochsin. So Od Hosifu Alehem Ro'im, so they also added to the shepherds, they added tax collectors and customs collectors. Tax collectors are people who take the money and give it to the government, and the customs collectors are the people who pay the government for the right to collect the money. Right? Two different mechanisms. Presumably, the Mochsin are more liable to greed. We don't even deal with them. As far as the tax collectors, however, because we have the story of Rabbi Zera's father, who was a really good guy, who was a tax collector, and he used to tip off the rabbis when they were coming to town, and they would all go and hide, and he would tip off the people, the tax collector is coming, and they would all hide their stuff, and then he would kind of just figure out who is to pay what taxes, and presumably he's protecting people. And in addition, on his deathbed, it seems that he had collected some taxes from somebody that he hadn't passed over to the government yet, so he didn't need yet. And rather than just leaving it in his desk drawer for his kids to inherit, he actually, on his deathbed, said, by the way, go get that money out of the handkerchief in my bed and give it back to so-and-so who doesn't even know I still have it. And it proves what a righteous and an honest person he was. So maybe tax collectors aren't so bad. So then you have the teaching of Rabbi Yehuda on the bottom of 25b4, where Rabbi Yehuda says, this is just review of where we were. We're getting momentum into where we are today. Rabbi Yehuda says, Stam roe pasul, stam gabai kasher. So on this basis, Rabbi Yehuda rules that a regular, average, run-of-the-mill, random shepherd is not kosher for giving testimony in court, but a regular run-of-the-mill tax collector is kosher, right? So that's just Rabbi Yehuda against the Baraita, so I don't know how Rabbi Yehuda wins, but okay, that's where the Rabbi Zera story comes in. Now, 25.
That's the end of 25 before, now we're in 26 and 1.
That was 25b4. Then we got the Rabbi Zera story, and Rabbi Zera's story with the kerchief, and now, good, we're all caught up. 26a1, the Mishnah. Osfe Shvi'it, Mishnah, which we have been talking about supposedly this whole time. Remember, Rabbi Shimon said that the Sochrei Shvi'it, which the Reisha of the Mishnah named as not kosher witnesses, were originally called Osfei Shvi'it. They were originally called the gatherers of Shvi'it. Now let's be clear. The Torah command about Shvi'it is, in the sabbatical year, you shall not plant your crops, harvest your crops. You need to leave it fallow. So, the stuff that grows in the field, who is allowed to eat it? Stuff that grows randomly in the field in the Shvi'it year, who is allowed to eat it? Everybody. Everybody. You're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to survive. You're not supposed to starve. So it's all hefker. In Shvi'it, everything is ownerless property. So, so the poor in particular have a right to it, right? No problem. And so they're going to develop a system here where they're talking today about, are the poor allowed to sell the Shvi'it that they have a right to? Because they're poor, right? Maybe they're not. Maybe they didn't want to eat the wheat, but they have a right to this much wheat, and
Apple trees.
so they can collect it and they could sell it, but just enough to sustain themselves, right? Maybe that would be allowed. Once the poor are certainly allowed to eat it. They have a right. They have an increased right to Shvi'it produce from other people. So that's gonna come into the picture, all right? Just to kind of know that. So it's not like Shvi'it is forbidden to you for benefit. It's forbidden to you for commerce. Okay, you're not allowed to make profit off Shvi'it. That's the main thing. All right, so my Kamar. Gemara says, what the heck is Rabbi Shimon saying? What is he saying? Amar Rav Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda comes in and he says, Hachi Kamar. This is what he's saying. B'tchila ayu omrim osvei Shvi'it ksherin sochrim psulin. Originally, the rabbi said that Shvi'it gatherers were kosher, but Shvi'it merchants are pasul, are not kosher. Mi sharabaha mitzieh ma'ot la'aniim va'az le'aniim va'asvei laho u'maitu. When they saw there was an increase of those who would offer money to the poor, so the poor would go and gather for them and bring it to them, chazru lomar echad ze v'echad ze psulin. The rabbis recanted their permission and they said everybody is pasul now. So what's the scheme? What scheme did people start putting into place in the seventh year?
Instead of them personally doing, they're using an agent. They're having the poor people because, hey, they're supposed to be there.
All right.
So they just take them and
So
they
poor
give it
people
to you.
are allowed to gather the Shvi'it, and poor people are allowed to sell their Shvi'it for self-sustenance because they're poor. So what did the owners of the land do? They hired a lot of poor people, and they paid them for the Shvi'it, which is now no longer Shvi'it. Because once the poor person legitimately owns it, it's not breaking a Torah law. So when a poor person picks up the Shvi'it, they actually acquire it, and it's theirs. It's not forbidden. It has been legally acquired. Now they can sell it.
This goes into, I think, letter versus spirit.
Absolutely letter and spirit of the law, 100%. That's why I use the word scheme.
Yeah, you
There-
can change the rules, but you can't change the game.
You can change the rules, but you can't change the game. This would be a game changer. In the seventh year, we hire only poor workers to produce our agriculture. The rabbis saw right through it. All right. Now, the Gemara is going to refute that interpretation of Rabbi Shimon by Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara is attacking Rabbi Yehuda's interpretation of Rabbi Shimon, which is it was originally osfei because of this poor people thing. Kashube b'nei Rachava. So the sons of Rachava are troubled by this explanation. All right. We've seen these guys before in a previous chapter. They've been around. Their names are Ephah and Avimi, and if you want to find them on 17b, you're welcome to. Kashube b'nei Rechava. So the b'nei Rechava are troubled by Rabbi Yehuda. They say, "Hi, Misharabu Anasim." If so, it should be. We have this when the oppressors increased, which is what Rabbi Shimon said. Rabbi Shimon actually said, "Misharabu Anasim," when the when the people who were oppressing them increased in numbers, that's when we said that we changed it from gatherers to sellers as those who are being ruled ineligible to testify. Those are the bad people. Mishraba hatagarim mibaile. Rabbi Shimon shouldn't have used that word, anasim. If it was because of people who were paying poor people to gather and get the shvi'it for them so you could then buy it and then sell it on market and make it a profit, Rabbi Shimon wouldn't have talked about anasim, oppressors. He would have talked about tigarim, which is Aramaic for sochrim, merchants. So this is a pretty good argument. I mean, Rabbi Yehuda comes in and he says the whole reason Rabbi Shimon did this is because people turned it into merchandise, and they were selling and buying. And the Bnei Rechava come in and they say, well, then he would have said that. He didn't say that. He actually said anasim, oppressors. That's what happened. So you need a different story. Ella, rather, this is what Rabbi Shimon meant to say. B'tchila hayu omrim echad zeh ve'echad zeh pesulin. Originally, it's not that originally the rabbis allowed it. Originally, the rabbis had disqualified everything. But misharabu anasim, when the number of oppressors grew, umayninu arnona, and these are the people who actually are collecting a specific tax, the royal tax known as the arnona. Kid machriz Rabbi Yanai, that was when Rabbi Yanai proclaimed the law to be puku v'zir'u b'shvi'it mishum arnona. You have to go and you have to plant your field and harvest shvi'it to pay the arnona. The Torah says you may not do this. Rabbi Yanai proclaimed because of the royal arnona tax, you have to go and plant your field in shvi'it, harvest it in shvi'it, and pay the arnona tax from it in shvi'it. Chazru lomar osfim ksherim and sochrim pesulim, and that was because of that ruling of Rabbi Yanai. That's when Rabbi Shimon came in and said that the osfim are kosher, but the sochrim are not. That the gatherers are kosher, the sellers are not, because they were commanded by Rabbi Yanai to go out and to plant and harvest the field to pay the arnona tax. Behind this, you need to know the arnona tax was subject to forfeiture of land. If you didn't pay the tax, the royal house would take your field. Now they own it. So because we didn't want people to lose their fields because of this being anus, Rabbi Yanai said you have to plant your field and you have to harvest it, but just for the arnona. And when you gather it, you're not doing anything wrong because you're not gathering it for to be a merchant. You're gathering it to pay the tax. And that's what Shimon meant by Rabu Anasim, the oppressors increased. That's why it's not about the aniyim being used as merchant, for merchants. So Rabbi Yehuda is wrong. Okay? Everyone with me? It's a nice little story. Okay, Rabbi Chia bar Zanuke ve Rabbi Shimon bar Yochad Tzadak havu ka'azle la'abed shana. Ba'asya is an important detail. Okay, so here we are with an interesting story which is pertinent for us. Tomorrow night begins the month of Adar Rishon, the first month of Adar. When you have an Adar Rishon, what do you know?
There's a second.
You will have an Adar Sheni. Right? You have an Adar Rishon, you'll have an Adar Sheni, meaning it's a leap year, correct. Well, in ancient times, how did they know it was a leap year? Well, it's a combination of moon and sun. So the Hebrew month is, 29, 30, 28 days. It kind of moves around. And it's not perfect because the moon doesn't run in 24-hour cycles. So every once in a while you have to have a month that's longer by a day or shorter by a day. But the problem with that is it can put holidays on the wrong days of the week. So because you can't fast going into Shabbos, and there's all kinds of stuff that happens. So it's a very elaborate calendar mechanism. By looking at the sky and seeing when the moon is new and the first sliver has appeared, that proclaims the first day of the month, which proclaims when the holiday will be on the 15th day of the month, because almost all of our holidays are the 15th day of the month, because that's the full moon, it's the brightest sky, and people traveling at night to get to Jerusalem will be able to get there safely. All that's related to observing the sky. However, because it doesn't match the solar year, every once in a while we get to Adar, and after Adar, Nisan, and it's January, right? Or early February. And if we let this be a 29-day month, we're going to have the celebration of Pesach in the like March 2nd or something. And what's the problem with that? Well, well, then you have a problem 7 weeks later with Shavuos happening in April. But the thing is that Passover and Shavuos are based on plant growth, and they're not growing yet.
Yeah.
Right? It's the barley harvest. You have to bring the omer. You have to bring the first sheaf of barley, and you have to wait while the wheat grows until you get to the holiday of first fruits. I mean, if the stuff's not growing, it's a ridiculous time to have the holiday. It doesn't work. So what they did was when they saw that it was getting earlier and earlier and earlier, they would do what's called intercalculation of the year. It's a technical term, to intercalculate the year, which is to determine that it will have.
That's not the word.
Intercalate, is that what they say?
Yeah.
I always get the word wrong. It's a word nobody knows and nobody uses. Intercalate,
Yeah.
the year. That means to determine that it is a year that will have an extra month. Okay? So there's a whole elaborate and very important system by which that is done. And we know that the new moon is generally done by witnesses. And who are the witnesses? Well, who's out there in the field staring up at the dark sky? Shepherds, Roe Vakar, the guys who have been declared by the Mishnah to not be kosher witnesses in general, but you can accept them as witnesses if you are all in agreement, which they had to do if they wanted the witnesses of the new moon to help them to intercalate the year, which was important because it affected the economy of the entire land because of Shvi'it, all based on the word of 3 shepherds who are normally not trustworthy. Okay, so there's related issues going on here. Okay, so we're going to do that, right? So witnesses are 2, you only need 2, but they said you need 3. To intercalate the year, you don't just need witnesses, you need a Beit Din, and so you could form a Beit Din from these 3 shepherds, right? If everyone agreed to accept them.
Okay.
All right? Nevertheless.
All right.
I don't know if we already did that or if that's coming, but that's in this chapter. Okay, so now, Rabbi Chia bar Zarnoke and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Tzedek are going to Asia, to Asya, to intercalate the year, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
How would you possibly be figuring out the new month and the leap year for the land of Israel in the Khyber Pass?
Is that where that is?
I don't know. It's on the way. That's the gateway to Asia, right? Yeah, I mean these guys aren't in Bavel. These guys are like beyond Bavel.
It's a region
It's
outside
more like India.
No one knows where it is.
It's-
We don't have a map that says this name. It's close enough to Asia that I wonder, but I don't know. It's outside the land of Israel, for sure. Okay,
And it's beyond Babel. Yeah.
I would guess. Maybe not. But it's not the land of Israel, and that's the point. Okay, so what happens? Pagabaho Reish Lakish, It Pil Behadaiho. Reish Lakish, who's a great scholar, joins with them, and he says, Amar Ezel Achaze Hechi Avde Uvda. You know what? This is remarkable. I'm going to come with you and see how you do this. Right? I'm going to watch how you do this. Chaze Lahahu Gavra de Kakarev. As they're going along, they see that guy over there plowing, all right? And presumably it's a Shvi'it year, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it. And Reish Lakish says, Amar Lahen, he says to Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Tzedek, Cohen v'choresh. We have a Cohen who is plowing, question mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So the problem is it's a Cohen plowing during a Shvi'it year. Now, you'll immediately ask, why do I care that he's a Cohen? That's going to come up.
They're still in it because.
Right.
And they know the guy's a Kohen. And
We have
they
all
know him.
kinds of problems with this scenario being a problem.
So they haven't left Israel yet.
We don't know
Still
that.
in Israel.
We don't know. All we know is they're traveling, they're on the way to this place, they see a guy plowing, and Reish Lakish declares, a Cohen who is plowing?
Now, does that mean he knows who the person is, or were Cohen's dressed specifically, or is there something to identify him as such?
It is a terse story without any of the details that you are crying out for. We don't know. Okay? So they say to him, Yachol Amar, and my eyesight is really getting bad with the little stuff. Yachol Amar, Agiston ani betocho. He could say, you know what, I'm just an employee in this field, in the middle of it. So he could say, so you see a guy plowing in Shvi'it, and are you going to assume that he's breaking the laws of Shvi'it? He might be an employee. Right? Your Bedouin neighbor might own the field, who's not under the laws of Shvi'it, and he hired you to plow his field because you can't work this year, so you got a job. What's the problem? Right? So that's what he could say to you. That would be his excuse. So that's their answer to Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish is with them, and he wants to see how they intercalate the year in Asya, a remarkable claim. And along the way, he sees a Shvi'it problem by a Kohen. He raises it, and they defend the guy. You never know. Maybe he's working for somebody else. Okay? Next. 2, Chazi lahahu gavra dahava kasach becharme. All right? So, further on, he sees the next guy who's pruning a vineyard. Now, do you know what pruning a vineyard is? I actually worked in vineyards as a kid.
Well, pruning is trimming.
Pruning is trimming. You're not harvesting grapes. This is early in the year. You have to cut back last year's new growth of vines, almost back to the woody part of the vine that comes up out of the ground. And the dangling stuff you cut, and when you cut it, it does two things. It leaves more of the energy of the plant into its core growth areas, which gives it more concentrated sugar for the grapes. And the second thing it does is sometimes it creates double growth spots if you cut it right, if the pruning happens in the right places. So you can have a branch going this way, and then you get another branch that'll go this way off of it, and then you tie those onto the wires or the lattice to allow them to grow free from each other and have maximum sunlight to the leaves. So that's called pruning. When you prune in the spring a grapevine, it's equivalent to planting the field for a wheat field. You're doing the stuff in the spring necessary to maximize the growth of your crop for your agricultural benefit. It is the springtime activity of agriculture for a vineyard. So you're not allowed to prune your field in the Shvi'it year. You're not allowed. It's one of the things you're not allowed to do. You can't prune your field, your vineyard, and you can't plow your field.
What happens to all the employees who normally do this? They don't have any work that year.
God will provide double the growth in the 6th year so that in the 7th year everyone eats well. That's what the Torah says.
So they don't have to worry about going without a paycheck for.
The problem is that God would need to provide triple, really, because you need to eat in the 6th year, you need to eat in the 7th year, and then you need to eat in the 8th year while the new stuff is growing. Right? Okay. Outside of rabbinic literature, we have no records of Shvi'it ever being observed. Right? This is really elaborate in the Gemara 200-300 years after, so we don't really know. But the rabbis seem very concerned about it, so.
Shvi, is that observed now?
Shvi'it is getting observed again now. There are all kinds of Shvi'it laws and practices that are happening in the land of Israel today. Most of them involve changing the ownership of the field during the year, and then going about your business as usual.
Like the way a baker, Pesach.
Yeah, I would say chametz during Pesach. Yeah.
Something like that. But in some cases, people do make a point of not purchasing produce from the land of Israel from that year. So you'll see people like on their etrog or something, it might be from Egypt.
You want to make sure when you put your label on your wine,
Well, there's certification. There's in Chashash B'Shvi certification. Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of people graduating yeshiva. They need to find some work. Okay. It's true. Okay, so now what? This is me?
This man is a Kohen, he's pruning in violation.
I'm sorry. My daughter is trying to call me, but I know why, so I'm turning it off. She's gonna like call me 5 times in a row, so let me just text her. Tell her I am teaching a class, and where you left your ear pods are not my problem. Just exactly
Isn't
what-
she in school?
Of course she's in school. I am in a class live online. Talk
She's not here,
later.
probably must know they're home.
Yeah, well, she thinks. Okay. Where was I? Okay, Rebbe Chimin. All right, so now we got the guy pruning the vineyard. Amar laho. So now they say to him, what's their excuse? Yachul omar le'akel beit habad ani tzarich. No, I'm just cutting these thinner pieces of the branches to make a netting that I'm going to use in the olive press, which is permitted, by the way, that I can press olives still. So they've come up with another excuse for this guy, this second guy, who looks like he's also doing something forbidden by the Shavuot year. Amar Lahan, Reish Lakish says to them, Lev yodeh im le'akel im le'akal kalot. He makes a pun. The heart knows if it is for a netting or if it is for sin. And the word for a net is akel, and the word for the sinning here is akalkel.
Why can you press the olives?
You can press the olives.
Why?
Why can you press the olives? The olives are not listed on the Shvi'it as things you can't do, but also the olives have dropped on the ground, and I don't know. They seem to have no problem with it. You're not harvesting them. You don't work the tree, and you don't harvest the land. So maybe you're just harvesting enough olives for your own personal use, right? Pressing olives is not forbidden. Selling produce is forbidden. So maybe if you pressed enough olives to fill lots of bottles and sell them at market, that would be forbidden. But pressing olives is not. And when you press the olives for your personal use, what happens is you need to have like a mesh to hold the skins in the nut, and and so that stuff, and you would make that by weaving supple branches, and the vine is actually a very strong and supple branch, so you can strip it, and you can weave nets out of it and stuff. Doesn't seem like the best way to do it, but he could tell you that.
And of course,
Right.
again, the guy's a Kohen, again, even though we don't know why or how he knows, but,
What does he know? He doesn't, I mean, a Cohen's Zomer, a Cohen is pruning, and they say, he could say to you, it's a net, and then he makes a pen. It could be a net, or it could be a sin. Now,
Reish Lakish is a hyperbolic trouble.
Reish Lakish, so we could ask ourselves the question, why did Reish Lakish go on this journey? Because he's presuming that these guys are astounding experts in halakha and he has much to learn? Or because he's presuming that they're charlatans and he's going to reveal their chicanery?
Why did he assume he's a Kohen? No, they asked that.
Yeah, all the questions are coming. All right, so we don't know why Reish Lakish is with these guys. At this point, we don't know if Reish Lakish is suspicious of these guys. We don't know if he's being adversarial with them. We don't know if he's being a nudnik or if he's Elliot Ness, and he's asking the right questions of
Or
people.
Robert Mueller, we can
Right?
modern.
We don't know what it is, but he says, yeah, well, only his heart knows if he's making a net or if he's actually breaking the laws of Shvi'it. That's only he knows. Now, the Gemara is going to come in and try and understand what's going on between these guys. Hey Amar Laho Bereisha. Now, wait a minute. What did he say at first? Ilema ha kamaita Amar Laho Bereisha. If it was the first story that he told them first, Hanami lemro giston ani betocho. He could have also said that I'm an employee, the second person. So, the Gemara is coming and saying, well, which happened first? The Kohen who was plowing or the Kohen who was pruning? Because then why didn't they say to him, for the Kohen that was pruning, the same answer, I'm just an employee in this field? Right? Why would he have to come up with a different answer? Makes no sense. So in that case, Ella ha'amar le beresha v'hadar amar lahohach. Rather, the vineyard story must have happened first, and then the second story about the plowing, you need a different answer because you can't plow to make a net for an olive press. Well, I'm glad that they pointed that out for us. Now, the Gemara, that's the end of that part. The Gemara is now going to ask the question you all asked, with what does this have to do with anything that he's a Kohen? And how would Reish Lakish know that? Like, Maishna Kohen. Why is it a Kohen in this story? Mishum de Chashidei Ashvi'it. Because Kohanim are inherently suspected that they are misappropriating Shvi'it. We don't trust Kohanim regarding Shvi'it.
Rufim, okay?
What's that? The Levi wants to know if he's included in.
The Kohen was supposed to be an honor.
No, you know what? Stuart asked a great question. He says, "I thought the Kohen was supposed to be an honored person."
Yeah.
The rabbis think Kohanim are largely ignoramuses, but they're Kohanim, so they have rights and they have privileges, but they need rabbis to keep an eye on them.
I think that's the Sadducees, Pharisees.
Sadducees were almost all Kohanim, so yeah, they probably didn't hold that point of view. Okay. I mean, that's why did the rabbis have us feed the Kohanim word by word the blessings of Duchanim? Yivarechecha, you're too dumb to remember that one word. I mean, is that what they're doing? Are they looking down on these guys? They don't even know the bracha? Right? It's the rabbinic voice that's prompting the Kohen how to do the duchening. The presumption was you could have a Kohen who's an Am Haaretz, who's a complete ignoramus, but he's a Kohen. So you need the rabbi there to lead him through, word at a time, put your hands on the animal here, cut its neck here. Like, the high priest was kept up all night long before Yom Kippur, going over the ritual all over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It wasn't out of piety. It was out of fear that this guy who doesn't know anything is going to screw it up and we're all in trouble. Right? The rabbis did not have a high view of the Kohanim in general. Now, to be fair, the Kohen offices in the late Second Temple period were full of graft and bribery and all kinds of things. People bought and sold those offices to get appointed into those offices, sometimes by Herod, sometimes by the Roman governor. There was a lot of meddling in those offices. So,
Just like
just
Chicago.
like Chicago.
You want that Senate seat, eh?
Right. We would like it to be a pure and a holy office, but because there was silver and gold and resource and power involved in it, unfortunately, the system was at times corrupt. Right? But the prophets tell us that too in the first temple. Isaiah and others come in and they lambaste the Kohanim for taking the good to themselves and giving the cruddy stuff on the altar and skimming off of
We're all
the.
supposed to be descendants of Aaron, right, the Kohanim. So we're,
Yeah, but
well, it rolls downhill like
the
this.
the apple doesn't fall. Yeah, it falls far from the tree when it rolls downhill. Maybe. Anyways, so how did he know it's a Kohen? Why is a Kohen important here? Ditna, or Ditanya. It's taught in a Breita. Seya truma shenafla lamea sein shel shvi'it tale. A seya, a smaller amount of truma that falls into 100 seyas of shvi'it, is nullified. Right? So what does that mean? If you have truma, which you have to give to the Kohanim, to the Levi'im, and it falls into a big pile of shvi'it, right? Does the truma still exist? Right?
I'm not following.
Okay, look at footnote 19. Look at footnote 19. It's going to explain it. All right, well, so literally the one seah should be lifted up. That is, if there were at least 100 parts of the non-truma shvi'it produce to be one part of truma, the entire mixture is regarded as permitted to non-Kohanim. Truma is nullified in a ratio of 100 to 1. However, one part to a Kohen, because although the truma is nullified as far as its prohibitory status, to a non-Kohen is concerned, the Kohen's monetary rights to the Seiya are not subject to nullification. So remember, you can eat Shvi'it, but you regular guy, cannot eat Truma. So it's not talking about Shvi'it here that you're not allowed to eat. It's talking about Shvi'it that you accidentally mixed Truma into. You with me? We've been talking about Shvi'it as the forbidden fruit up until this point. But remember, it's not. You can go out and you can pick Shvi'it and you can eat it.
You just can't sell it.
You can't make a business off of it. So now you've got your Shvi'it that you've harvested for yourself, and you have your Truma that you separated off for the priests, and you got chocolate in my peanut butter, and I got peanut butter in your chocolate, right? We mixed it. Well, how much? If it's less than 1/100th, it's disappeared. Halachically, it doesn't matter. It doesn't exist anymore. But the footnote tells us you still owe 1/100th of it to the Kohen. Right? So that's the case here.
Isn't this similar to a kashrut with
It's
milk
like
and
60.
How much of the pile could the Kohen eat?
Okay, yeah.
All of it. How much of the pile can the non-Kohen eat? Either all of it or none of it. So regardless of the mixture, the Kohen has status to be able to eat the Shvi'it. Right? So there is a difference for a Kohen when it comes to Shvi'it if Truma got mixed in. This is where we're going. We'll see why. All right, so Seya Truma Shenaflu Lameas Sein Shel Shvi'it Tale. So if you have a Seya of Truma that fell into 100 Seyas of Shvi'it, it is nullified. Pachot Mikan Yirkavu. But if it was less Shvi'it than that, the Truma got mixed into like 50 times its amount of Shvi'it. You regular guy are not allowed to benefit from it. You're not allowed to eat Truma. So you've now spoiled your entire pile of Shvi'it as well. Your kavu, you have to let it rot. You can't sell it because you're not allowed to sell Shvi'it.
So the answer would be to get more so that
You can't then add Shvi'it. You already did it. You're not allowed to intentionally dilute your Truma. Otherwise everybody would do that. Smart, but evil. No, you can't do that. Pachot mikan yirkavu. Less than this, they have to let it rot. The havinanba. But we asked a question regarding this. Amai yirkavu. Why should you let it go to waste like that? Im kareinu lechoen b'demei truma chutz midemei otas seya. Why not sell it to a Kohen at the truma price, excluding the value of that one seya of truma, because you had to give it to him for free? Right? So it's not like a Shvi'it pile with Truma in it has no value. You could find a Kohen to sell it to. Why you need to let it rot? Right? Because the Kohen's allowed to eat some Truma, and the Shvi'it was an acceptable amount, maybe. By the way, the Kohen Truma price, which you probably think is higher, is actually lower. Because there's no market for it. Right? Truma, you can't sell it, so it's a lower price. The regular stuff would be a higher price, you have a bigger market. Amar Rabbi Chia Mishmei de Ula. Rabbi Chia said in the name of Ula, Zot Omeret Nechshedu Kohanim Ashvi'it, and because of all of this, they said, oh no, I skipped it. Did I skip a line? V'havinam be yimkarenu lechoen b'damei truma chutz midamei otaseya. We did that. V'amar Rabbi Chia Mishmei de Ula, Zot Omeret Nechshedu Kohanim Ashvi'it. No, this teaches us that the reason that you can't sell it to the Kohen teaches us that they suspected the Kohen to violate the laws of Shvi'it because they would have an advantage in that scenario to use their truma to leverage getting Shvi'it at a cheaper price. Right? Hear what I'm saying? Like now they're going to get this whole pile of Shvi'it with a little truma in it for a really cheap price. So that's like an incentive to be unethical. So they're suspect around Shvi'it in a way other people can't be, I guess. Anyways, it's not an ironclad case, but so we're going to say that Reish Lakish pointed out that it was a Kohen plowing because of this principle from this other story that Kohanim are suspect around the laws of Shvi'it in general. It's not a direct connection. It's not a home run. But that's where it comes from. Now, the Gemara is going to go back to the story. Amru. So Reish Lakish is back with Chia and Shiva. And that's what we're going back to.
They haven't even determined the new moon yet.
They haven't figured out the new moon, but that's coming.
Well,
All
I haven't
right.
gotten there yet.
Amru Charuda Hudin. They said, this guy's a pain in the butt. Tarud means you're constantly busy and worried about something. Ladin, for judgment, right? The guy's a nudnik. He's asking halachic challenge after halachic challenge, right? And he's watching us. So, Kimatu lahatam, when they arrived there to the place they were going, Salika le'igra shelafua ledarga mitote. So, you read ahead. You're laughing because you read ahead. So they go up to the upper floor and they pull the ladder up after themselves, so that Reish Lakish can't follow them, right?
Yeah.
So why'd they do that? So they're going. They're going to look at the sky. They're going to figure their things out, and they're going to declare whether or not there's leap month. They don't let the nudnik up the ladder.
And then they'd have to go back to make the proclamation.
Yes, but it's on their authority that proclamation is being made under suspicious circumstances. Like they're doing something nobody else can do. They're in Asya determining when the new moon and the leap year will be. Reish Lakish comes along to see how they do it, and he asks them this question about a Cohen and that question about a Cohen and Shvi and this, and they say, well, it could have been this and it could have been this. And he's obviously somebody who's investigating. He's challenging their halachic knowledge. He's challenging where they are on these issues, right? They have halachic views that are very, very suspect.
It would be because of what racial Lakish's background would lead him to be that type of individual. He's a gladiator.
He had been a gladiator who converted to Judaism.
No, what his opponent's doing.
Reish Lakish was a Roman soldier who converted to Judaism.
So, being a soldier, we want to see what the opposition is doing, to feel them out before he engages them. And that's exactly what he's doing here. So you have to know the background of the individual.
He may not have an inherent reverence for everybody. Like he's seen a lot of people do a lot of bad things. Like a cop views people
right.
differently, right, Stuart?
This is true. This is true. What's this?
All right.
You know, when you get that gut feeling
Right.
that the guy's up to no good.
Right, that guy's up to no good, or the story the person's telling you is just, I've heard better liars than you. Right? You have a suspicious side, and you can't help it. All right. Atu l'kamei l'Rabbi Yochanan. So Reish Lakish comes back from this journey, and he goes to Rabbi Yochanan. Amar le, b'nei Adam ha'chashivin ala shvi'it ksherim la'abed shana. These guys who are suspected regarding these Shvi'it rulings, you're going to let them determine the whole calendar? Right? That's what he says to Rabbi Yehuda. So obviously he was unimpressed by them when they took the ladder up. Right? And his questions about Shvi'it, he's not happy with their answers, and they are very suspected, suspicious, untrustworthy people. Right? Hadar Amar, but then he reconsidered. Hadar means chazar. He repented. He returned. So this is going to be a series of Reish Lakish statements arguing with himself. He's really mulling this over in his mind. He goes, oh, but it's this, but no, wait a minute, it could be that, but wait a minute, it could be this. This is all going to be Reish Lakish talking to himself. Okay? So, Reish Lakish goes to Rabbi Yochanan and he says, suspicious people are allowed to be kosher for determining the year. And then he says to himself again, no, now wait a minute, lo kashi aliyah. On the other hand, that's not actually a good challenge for me, because mide dahava ashalosha roe vakar, because maybe these guys, these very suspicious guys, are like the three shepherds, the three cattle herders from our Mishnah who are allowed to be a Beit Din, right? V'Rabbanan achushv'nayhol samuch, and the rabbis relied on their calendar calculations on those guys. So, and it hangs in the air. So, I guess, even if these guys are also no goodniks, they're like Socher Shvi'it or something, which is in the same category as the Roe Vakar, and we were allowed to have 3 Roe Vakars. Maybe these guys can too, I don't know. V'hadar v'omar, but then he thought it over again, and he said, but, la dame, wait a minute, those aren't the same thing. The three Roe Vakar and these two guys. Hatam hadur imnu rabbanan ve'iberua lahahu shata, because they're the rabbis were sitting there, and the guys came in, and the rabbis were also part of the Beit Din that was determining the year. So they didn't even need those three guys in their Beit Din to have the authority to determine the year. So maybe they weren't even relying on them. Hacha kesher v'shaimhu. And here, it's a cabal. It's a group of bad people, right? V'kesher risha'im einel min minyan, and you can't count a cabal in your minyan, right? So if I've got like three guys who are criminals, they're engaged in organized crime, such that they would not be kosher witnesses, I can't count them in a minyan. And I can't include them in a Beit Din, and I can't, there's all kinds of things I can't include them in, right? So those guys who helped the rabbis set the calendar weren't even counting in the minyan of the Beit Din that the rabbis needed to establish the calendar. They heard from them, but they didn't count them. Kesher Hashem eno min minyan. Now that he's been babbling to himself back and forth, Rabbi Yochanan will answer him. Okay? So Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Daka, you are distressing me. This is very uncomfortable, Rabbi. What's very uncomfortable?
These guys that you're challenging.
These are rabbis. You're talking about rabbis like they're a kesher rishayim? You're talking about these are rabbis. How can you do that? So word of the conversation reaches Chi and Shimon. Ki atu l'kamen li Rabbi Yochanan amrule. So these guys now wind up in front of Rabbi Yochanan later on, and they hear about this, and they say, Karilan ro'e vakar, v'lo amar le'mar, v'lo midi? Wait a minute. He likened us to cattle herders, and you didn't say anything? They are like hurt beyond measure. How can you call he did Amar Laho? Rabbi Yochanan says, "V'ikari l'chu ro'et son ma'yamin alei." He kind of pokes fun at them. So if he called you sheep herders, should I have said? Remember, sheep herders outside the land of Israel are kosher. But there's a stam joke here that you have to be really involved. The land of Israel, sheep and bakar and so forth. The sheep herders inside, but the sheep herders outside. That's what he's referring to. This is a stam joke. The stam is joking. No, it's the best he does. You're not going to get a funnier stam joke than this. But anyway, he sets it up, and Rabbi Yochanan says, if he called you sheep herders, would I have had a different answer? So he's like, yeah, he's preserving their dignity by not calling them unbelievable for what they've done, trying to intercalate the year in Asya and pulling the ladder up, but he doesn't undermine the suspicion or the accusation that has been foisted against them. He doesn't address that, and he refuses to recant or to combat that. All he says to the one side, he says to Reish Lakish, I'm really uncomfortable by the way you're talking about these guys. And when the other guys come, he says, yeah, really? And if he had told you something else, would I have answered? Should I have answered? What do you want me to say, right? So he leaves them both kind of hanging. Now, I love it. At this point, the Schottenstein makes the comment that the Gemara digresses. I'm not sure what the whole intercalating thing was, if not a digression, but okay. Digresses to talk about Kesher Rishayim. Since we mentioned the phrase Kesher Rishayim, a cabal of bad people, we're going to take a moment and talk about that. The problem is that the moment is an extended moment. So we don't have time to begin it, so we'll have to stop, because it's going to go on for like the next page. That we're going to go to what is a catch bad people. If anybody wants to do a little research on the guy who's going to be the central piece of this story, you can read Isaiah 8, which is, I think, where this comes from, and the stories of Chizkiah, the king. We're going to be dealing with Shevna, who is a guy who betrays Chizkiah.
They still have to determine the new month today in Israel. They still have to determine.
Yes, well-
that. This can be done now by astronomy and
Yeah,
hopefully magic.
what we're going to see is that the rabbis, the other point of why the rabbis didn't need the Roe Vakar is that on their own authority and their own mathematics, they could determine the month, and they really don't need the people looking up at the stars anymore. So certainly by Talmudic times, the calendar is set without witnesses of any kind, and we have it now set completely through mathematics. Okay? That's it for this week. We'll see you next week. We're off in 2 weeks, but we're on next week.